I'm your masked man today. My name is John Young. I'm a retired Unitarian Universalist minister, and I knew Ann Greenwood when we were both in our 20s in Bloomington, Indiana, which was my first full-time parish ministry. There were 51 people in that academic congregation that had written whole books. And so there was almost nothing that I did or said that someone in the congregation didn't know more than me, except perhaps about Gandhi and a few other things. But I'm delighted to be here. I had been in this pulpit before, but it's been a long time. I'm going to share with you in the course of the service today some different things that are important parts of my spiritual life. We each have our own, and so I'm not suggesting yours need to be mine. I'm just holding mine out as examples of what we have, the riches that we have around the world that are available to us. So our opening words today, which I would love for you to read with me, I think they're going to be up on the screen, are words by Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, that great work of mysticism and naturalism that are central, really, to the Taoist tradition and very available to us. So many of us are philosophical naturalists and see nature as the center of part of our spiritual practice. Creative endeavor without possession. That's fine, you did it. And development without domination. So creative endeavor without possession. Action without aggression. And development without domination. And of course, I don't get through a single week without breaking at least one of those, probably all three. But I'm working at it and have been for, about 60 years now. So they're important to me. We'll now have our musical prelude.
Good morning, everyone. Here in the sanctuary and those of you at home, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Karen Elliott, your worship associate for today. If this is your first time here, we're so glad you've come. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to better care for one another and welcome each other. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that the Church occupies land in Huichin, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is deeply felt and commit our congregation to be in right relationship with Indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting Indigenous projects, and caring properly for the land. This morning, I'd like to welcome to our chancel our guest, Reverend Dr. John Young, who will be speaking on how do we nurture our spiritual paths. A little about John. John has a PhD in political science and in ministry and was a Harvard Fellow. He has served multiple UU churches as minister and has held senior UU offices. At the University of North Florida, he taught courses on the religions of India, on combining community activism with spiritual practices, on nonviolence, and with Archbishop Desmond Tutu on the truth and reconciliation process. Throughout his life, he has been an active advocate for disarmament, civil rights, and an end to racism, poverty, and homelessness. We're so glad to have you, John, and look forward to hearing more. Let's prepare our space now with the lighting of the chalice flame. If you're online, you might get a candle and a way to light it so that you can join in from home. Today, Anne Green will light our flame and candles. As John said, Anne is a longtime friend of his. Let us kindle our chalice flame with these words by the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals. We also pause now to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience that we need so badly. We light a candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. May we find and cultivate these foundations of resilience in ourselves and in one another. Thank you, Anne. And now, please rise in body or spirit as you're able, and join us in singing our opening song, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place, number 1008 in the Teal hymnal. The words will be on screen. Please remain standing if you can. That's a new thing for us, isn't it? It's an old thing that we're returning to. And join with me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Let's remember that as citizens of the United States, we still have much to celebrate and many reasons to be proud of being an American. We are and were far from being perfect. Our nation's history, like every other nation and people, has had real injustices and has them today. We are a nation of immigrants. Our ancestors came today from many other nations. But we cannot welcome everyone who would like to live here, so we need to elect representatives who make and change our laws so they will help us to create and uphold the rules that will work for all of us. It is not easy to make fair rules, and even harder to live them. We Unitarian Universalists are a tiny group of people in a big country. There are only 148,000 of us who have become members of a congregation. There's always about 1 million who say they're Unitarian Universalists, but a lot fewer than that join and contribute and participate. While, for instance, the number of Roman Catholics in the San Francisco diocese alone is 60,000 more than the number of Unitarian Universalists in the whole country. An important part of what makes Unitarian Universalists different from other spiritual people is that we try really hard to be inclusive, embrace and welcome people unlike ourselves. So we need, at least to be fair, try hard to do justice, act with love whenever we have the strength to do so, support the communities that support us, and try to forgive others as they forgive us. As we do so, we need to remember that everyone has value and everyone makes mistakes. Native Americans were often savages with one another. They also did many good things that we can learn. Africans had slaves before any American did, and they still had slaves longer after it had become illegal in the United States. All colors of people deserve respect and fairness, but to heal the wounds that we can heal, we need to remain inclusive and not become narrow or dogmatic. Each day, I take some time in silence. I ring a little Buddhist bell like I will just now, and then I'm in silence. And spirituality, of course, is essentially what we do with our aloneness, with the fact that each of us is a unique, irreplaceable individual in the world, and we have to figure out in the course of our lives, how do we do that? How do we be ourselves, be alone, as well as together with others? But meditation has two main aims. The first aim in meditation is to simply get calm. As the Buddhists like to say, you have a monkey mind. It's running around. It's doing all these different things all the time. And so how do you get your mind to slow down so you're not making your grocery list or watching something when you think you're alone, but you're not really alone because you're with millions of people on that tube or online. So the first object is to find yourself, usually by breathing slowly, just getting calm. But then once you're calm, then the object is to go someplace with that, to take some objective of what you're trying to do in your life and focus on it, so you can make a little progress in that individual spiritual life. And I find after a period of silence, which varies for me from 20 to 30 or 40 minutes, that it really helps me to sing. And so I'm going to have you sing with me a couple of songs that I make a part of my daily practice. They're from different traditions. They're both in our old blue hymnal. The first is by Rumi, the Islamic Sufi mystic, perhaps the greatest mystic that ever lived, certainly one of them. And there are some wonderful translations into English, and I recommend him. So we're going to sing that song first, and it's very short. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. So we can remain seated, but let's sing it together. The other song is by Confucius. The Chinese humanist tradition, of what Confucius was the father, is, I think, very relevant for a great many of us because particularly the ones in my generation and accompanying generations, were a lot of us humanists, we weren't sure that we even wanted to go to church, and then we found Unitarian Universalism, and we thought, okay, that's okay. That's all right. I don't know, it's not traditional. And so I think it's very useful, but I think these words by Confucius lead us a little farther, as I think the Confucian tradition does. Because one of the things about us Western humanists is we've tended to gotten a little obsessed with our individualism and our liberty, and not quite so much with our responsibilities to the community and how we fit into larger groups. So I think this has something to teach us. Pretty good doctrine, eh? I find it very useful. So don't get so busy that you don't have some time for silence each day in your life. Otherwise, life has a way of running away from us. Don't let it run away from you. Take time and catch it every day. Shanti, shanti, shanti.
One day in May 1970, when I was studying and living in India, I was returning to Delhi from a few days in the hills, and a large photo on the front page of the English language newspaper caught my eye in the bus station. It was of an anguished white girl kneeling over a prostrate body. She was looking up, screaming, her arms open wide. Kent State. Fear and horror swept through me as I read about the protest that had turned into a massacre. Students my age. Was this it? I had my passport. Maybe I shouldn't go home. Maybe it wasn't safe. I did go home. 2 months later found me outside on a summer afternoon in Madison, Wisconsin, hanging out with my brother, listening to a local R&B band play. The music was fantastic. I remarked with joy how great it was to hear American music again. There was just nothing like it. And there we are, two sides of America's evolution. Clenched, violent reaction against loss of control, and marvelous synthesis of multiple creative streams into something entirely new. And my two reactions: fear and horror, and joy and pride. The January 6th hearings, with their riveting presentation of testimony and facts, has been affirming for me. I feel pride in the visible integrity there, akin to the joy I felt hearing that R&B band that day. But the Supreme Court hearings last week, not only Dobbs, but also the concealed gun carry and climate rulings and church and state, they were a gut punch. Frightening. Extremist justices overturning constitutional law and simple common sense, ignoring the needs and human rights of today's citizenry, benefiting a patriarchal, misogynistic, theocratic, and vengeful minority. I was and remain horrified. Those two Americans again, what, 50 years later? And my two responses: happy pride, horror, fear. So, how to keep steady? There's a Sufi saying: hold on to that rope of love. Sometimes we have to swing over an open chasm. I know of two people who held on to that rope, Dr. King and John Lewis. I try to honor them and their faith by not despairing at the unconscionable actions of the extreme right these days, but instead continuing with the rest of you to do the work of love as best I can, striving for social justice, building genuine community. One way I try to strengthen myself for this work, in the face of incessant violent messaging, is by practicing gratitude. Our indigenous teachers remind us that beauty is all around us, among us, within each of us. We can see it, smell it, hear it, touch it, feel it. if we just will, beauty and goodness. In a mysterious way, when I express gratitude for these, not just feel it, but express it, consciously, I also invite in love. It's as though a conversation gets started between me and a source larger than myself. Each time I consciously express gratitude for my cat's purr, my daughter's text, a breeze on my face, Ketanji Brown Jackson on the court, soon after, another opportunity to feel grateful arrives, as though in reply. Gives me goosebumps. Love getting strengthened. So, that's my mantra for now. Hold on to that rope of love. Sometimes we have to swing over an open chasm.
Thank you, Karen. Most of you know very well, but if you're new among us, either here in the sanctuary or online, electronically, and new to us, you may not know, but in our Unitarian Universalist congregations, if we're fortunately large enough, we may have ministers, but basically, each Unitarian Universalist is also their own minister and often feels and sometimes does know a lot more than their ministers. And so you will hear preaching from the choir and the whole congregation all the time, in a sense. And that's fine. That's the way we like it. That's what we think is appropriate. How do we nurture our spiritual past? We nurture our spiritual past through a lifelong process of having experiences and striving to understand them and make use of them. We do so by trial and error through learning things first from our parents, family, friends, and neighbors, and then through learning things that we hear, see, read, and find out as we become educated, grown up, and become worldly. Daily, we use both our growing empirical, rational, scientific understanding to analyze our experiences and develop rational concepts. And we use our growing intuitive, imaginative, mystical insights to guide our insights and actions. Think of an early time in your life when you first understood something important. How did you learn it? I remember when I was about 4 years old and sitting with my mother in the backyard and talking about nature. I was probably fascinated by some insect. And she said that we were all part of nature and that each of us had special parts to play in its constant changes. Those ideas shaped my life. Or when I was 11, being given 2 books by a neighbor who was discarding them as I cleaned out his garage. A book on yoga and Gandhi's autobiography, My Experience with Truth. And those books shaped my life. Those and thousands of other experiences have shaped my rational understanding. Now, how about an early experience when you were caught in wonder, swept with a feeling of unity with all of reality, grasp life as a whole, or we're embraced in ecstasy. I remember feeling that in nature, with music. Part of the great thing about being a minister is the only time you really can let yourself go is while the music is going. So I often did, So I quite often find something to cry to or feel ecstatic about right in the midst of the service, because part of my natural state is sort of ecstatic, but you can't get up and do that in a pulpit continuously. People think, man, this guy is over the top, I remember it as I rode my bike or ran, or when I listened to people talking. We don't just learn things with our reason, and we don't just experience ecstasy without both our intuitive imagination and some rational pondering and learning. Our spiritual paths are the life choices we make throughout our lives. We may not think that we are religious, maybe not even spiritual, but if we put our faith in them and make our life choices based on them, then they must be our chosen life paths, and that must be your spirituality. Spirituality is what we do with our aloneness, and religion is the philosophical and mystical part of what we do with our togetherness, whether we're in a church or a library or a college class or a laboratory. Faith is not something that you have or lose. It is the hopes and dreams that you hold onto the course of your lives, like that rope that Karen talked about. I also believe that most people are religious because they discover that they cannot endure or flourish without other people in social groups. And they choose to join with some of them in collective endeavors that include statements of principles, rituals and celebrations, actions and dialogues. These communities we choose lift us up and make us whole, and at times also disappoint us and break our hearts. Just as we in our aloneness also discover and create our own wholeness, but continue to be periodically disappointed by who we are and what we do. Each of us has part of the truth, and no one has all of the truth. Everyone is faithful and flawed, saved and searching, has strong beliefs and strong, profound doubts. 21st century humanity has increasingly shared perspective because contemporary global conditions compel us to develop a common reality that allows us to communicate and cooperate, sharing scholarship, collaborating in scientific discoveries, using technologies, enjoying our creations, and healing our wounds. Intuitively, most human beings realize that each of us has some of the truth and no one has all of it. And it is increasingly apparent to a majority of human beings that we can all learn useful things from other people. Basically, any other person. This shared global perspective, certainly not universal, but it is global, and it includes a significant proportion of our world's population. As I hope we all remember, our Unitarian Universalist religious denomination has 8 principles and 6 traditions. The second and sixth principles relate directly to my address today. The second declares our acceptance of one another and our encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. And the sixth declares that we share the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. 3 of the 6 traditions speak directly to my address today. The first tradition declares that we seek direct experiences of the transcendent mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures that moves us to the renewal of spirit and openness to the forces that create and uphold life. In other words, we don't want just secondhand religion that we get from somebody else, that we get from a creed, or we get from a dogma, or we get from a book. We want to experience it ourselves. And part of the great things that I've spent my whole career as a minister trying to do is get Unitarian Universalists to open up about what their actual experiences are with one another. I think there's still some too pervasive fear in our congregations about doing that. Oh, they'll think, I'm over the wall, that I'm too mystical, that I'm not rational enough. Nonsense, friends. These are cores of your life. They're important things. My congregation in the Sacramento Society had a lot of very kind of 50s, 60s hardcore humanists. And as a minister, of course, you become privy more to people's lives. And so in the course of events, I find sort of the big six among that group that always said, oh, no, I'm not spiritual, I'm not religious, I just come because I like the people here. Every one of them had a classical mystical experience, and I got them to do a group in the evenings where they shared with one another what those experiences were. And it was like, wow! They didn't know that about each other, and they'd known each other for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We can all be doing that, and I really urge you to do that. Urge you to do that with one another. The third declares that the wisdom of the world's religions inspires us in our ethical and spiritual lives. And the sixth tradition declares our embrace of the spiritual teachings of the earth-centered traditions that celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Your own beloved and now deceased member, John Tucker, was an important person in adding that tradition to our denomination. Did you realize that fewer than 47% of Americans now belong to a religious congregation? While it was 70% in 1999, half of Americans have changed their religions in the course of their lives. And 25% of marriages are interfaith unions, like my daughters and my sons. In California, 27% of California residents are foreign-born. Half of California's children are foreign-born, have a foreign-born parent, as my children do. The United States of America is the most religiously diverse nation on earth. California is the most diverse state, and the Greater Bay Area, probably one of the most spiritually diverse regions in the world. So, if as a denomination we are seeking greater diversity and more members in our congregations reaching out to people who share our 21st century perspective, but grew up and came from other religious traditions and cultures, is an obviously effective path. I've had Hindus in the congregations I've served. I've had Muslims in the congregations I've served. I've had Buddhists and Jews and Christians, even a Zoroastrian. I've had people of all these different backgrounds. They can be at home among us. And we need to be truly welcoming of them. The last congregation I served was Jacksonville, Florida. And I had a wonderful African-American couple, salt of the earth kind of people. He was a major figure in a national labor union. She was a teacher. But when they came to church dressed for church as you do in the South, so a lot better dressed than most Unitarian Universalists on Sunday. And they were carrying Bibles, and they were wearing crosses. And a lot of the congregation, wanted to welcome African Americans, of course, but they were going like this because they were Christian. And even after he'd served as the president for 2 years, a lot of the people still couldn't quite swallow the fact that he was a Christian. Now, there's something wrong with that. If we're tolerant, what does it mean if we can't accept somebody who actually is a Christian in our congregations or a Jew and really believes it, but wants to be part of our community? We've got to get over that, or we won't grow. And that doesn't have anything to do with being anti-racist or anti-sexist or anything. That has to do with being intolerant of people that are different from ourselves because they share a different faith. That's wrong, and we've got to overcome it. we are not alone in this exploding diversity. Millions of people throughout the globe share a part of our standards and flourish in a 21st century context. But they also have their own faiths. Some of them actually practice that faith. Many may not, but they still identify it as their faith, as some of you identify yourselves as Christians or Jews. And so that's part of what we need to look at and realize how diverse the world is. Out of the 7 billion plus people in the world, in excess of 2 billion are Christians, 1.2 billion of them are Roman Catholic, but the growth of Christianity now is mostly in the global south and not in the global north. 1.5 billion are Muslim, 1 billion are non-religious by traditional standards, most of them communists, particularly the Chinese communists, but also people in Western nations. 1 billion are Hindu, mostly in India, but over 1 million Hindus now in America, and by the way, they are the best educated and the wealthiest ethnic group in our country. So a lot more of them ought to be Unitarians than are. They won't stop being Hindus. They can do both, just as many of our own people do. And some of them are afraid to tell you that they go to Mass on Easter, because it's a real Easter or whatever. 60 years ago, Professor Houston Smith, who I heard here in your forum before the service, I think, in the world religions made a useful generalization by saying that the Western religions concentrated on the material universe within a single male deity involved in human history, while the Eastern Asians had concentrated on the unity of heaven, earth, and humanity, with humanity's job being to unify them through prudent social relationships, while the South Asians concentrated upon the connections that people could make within the divine through individual liberation and cosmic evolution. So much of the spiritual growth among people in the last 2 centuries has been dealing with all this incredible change in the world and improvement and people living longer and getting better education and having more opportunity. But also coming to terms with their mystical side through things like psychology and C.G. Jung, mysticism, and myths. I want to talk about some of the different religious traditions very briefly and just give you examples that have been important to me. Not necessarily because they'll be the important ones to you, but more to open you up to the fact that there is an abundance of riches here, and that if you don't make any use of them, it's sort of like, okay, I don't believe in nonfiction, or I don't believe in fiction, or I don't read biographies, or whatever. It's just eliminating a whole branch of knowledge because, you're not as interested in that as something else. My first wife and mother of my children was from India, and she had a Hindu father and a Jain mother. And I have been much affected by both of these religions. Hinduism, as you know, has a lot of gods and goddesses, a lot of images and ways of considering the divine. But behind it all is the idea that there is a Brahman, Atman, that there's a creative force that's causing it all and is the ultimate reality. But there's also the Atman, there is the spirit within each of us that's unique and our job to unfold, to evolve. And that makes the best sense to me about what God is. So I use the word creation. I don't use the word God normally. But that's what I mean by God, is creation, the whole of reality. But also I believe in this individual spirit within each of us, so that's part of it. The Hindus also have a sense of the 4 stages of life, and I found this very useful. They divide it into 4 quarters. The first quarter is being a student. You're not supposed to know everything. You're supposed to be learning from others. You're supposed to learn a vocation, etc. The second quarter is the householder. You're supposed to be sexy. You're supposed to want to have children. You're supposed to want to have a family. You're supposed to be ambitious. You're supposed to be acquisitive. But then, about the grandparent stage, you're supposed to get over those things. You know, you're supposed to not be quite so excited about making money or collecting property or possessing things or having power. You're shifting from being in charge to being a mentor, to helping other people do those things. And in the last stage of life, you're realizing that you're going to face death, and you're figuring out, how can I deal with that effectively? Now, of course, for most of world history, this was all had to happen within 30, 40 years because everybody was dead after that, almost everybody. Now we are given so much more time, and so we really have an opportunity to develop all four of these stages. And so I simply urge you to consider thinking about ways that you can use each stage and grow from one stage to another and not get caught in one. It feels kind of, it just feels like the person's unhappy if they're still acting like they're 25 and they're 78. You know, we all have our moments, but you know, at some point we ought to make full use of each of these stages. The Jains have a couple of amazing ideas, because all these years ago, Jainism is as old, a little older than Buddhism actually, similar like idea. There's 2 million Jains, so a lot bigger than Unitarian Universalism, most in India. They think life is all a matter of probabilities. You can't actually have certain truth. You can only be more or less probable. And they think everything is evolving forever. It's going to keep changing forever. Hopefully it will cycle up, but not inevitably. And so they're after self-conquest. They're after being nonviolent, merciful with other people, trying to do as little harm as they can do. A lot of my practice is Buddhism, and the Buddhists have this wonderful sense of trying to combine enlightenment and compassion. And of course that is the rub, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty hard to do either one, but to try to do them together, that's the real trick. That's the real trick from day to day. The Taoist and Confucian traditions, to me, add these elements of naturalism and humanism that we can learn from. And they have aspects of both of those that we rarely have completely owned in the West. And so I think we really have things to learn from them. I've been much affected by Japan's spirituality, which has been syncretistic. It's combined religions really since the get-go of Japan. Because the original Japanese were mostly not indigenous. They came from other places to that island because of changes in weather or climate and so on. And then they weren't a very cultured people, frankly, at first, and then they kind of adopted a lot of Chinese things, and they adopted a lot of Buddhism, and so with their Shinto ideas that kami, that gods are every place and everything, sort of, they combined with Buddhism and Confucian and Taoist ideas to make what is Japanese spirituality. And I've gotten a great deal of that out of that because I worked first with a Konkokyo friend. It's a Neo-Shintoist group that was at my seminary at the University of Chicago in Meadville. And then I went and studied his religion in Japan. And their way of counseling is sort of a combination of Western psychology and pastoral counseling and Shinto ideas. And it's quite fascinating and very helpful. The other concept that's really made so much difference to me among the Japanese is what they call ame, A-M-A-E, and it is the idea that you ought to intuit what people need, that's a way of being more other-centered rather than self-centered. And so, you know, they don't talk about I much or me. They talk about group things and being part of a group. They're trying to become more successfully dependent rather than rigorously independent, which I find very useful. When my son was at Stanford for a couple of quarters, and he got this robe for me, I want to show you. And slowly at my age, I have to get off the podium and talk louder, but it conveys the flow of seasons. And many of us are pagan in that way. You should say it again to the... Yeah, we are pagan in that way. The seasons are very important to us. We may do a call to the directions. We may have neo-pagan groups or consider ourselves neo-pagan. And some of that connects very well with some ideas in Japanese religions. My Judaism is the Judaism of Spinoza and of Buber. It's God, it's Buber's God of the between. It's a God that, I guess I'll tell you a short story that I like very much from the High Holy Days. I think it's a Hasidic tale, and rabbinic students are studying with their master, and they say, well, how do we really celebrate Yom Kippur, the most revered day of the year, when all the new year is going to begin? How do you do that? They said, go see this tailor. Watch through the window, remain in secret, but see what he's doing. Well, he took down this great big book, and it said, the book said, these are all the things he'd written out all year, all the things that he'd done against God and other people. And as many of you would know, Jews feel with other people, you have to make it right with them if you can, and if you can't make it right with them, you need to make it with some other child because you can't deal with your own child, or with some other elderly person because you can't deal with somebody because they've become deceased, for instance. And they were all thinking, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. He's kept track, and he's kept track of what he's done wrong with what he considers God or creation and what he's done with other people. And they were leaving, and then one stayed behind and he said, wait, he's getting down a bigger book. And then he opened that book and he said, now these are all the things, God, that you've done against me during the year. And that to me grabs at the heart of what Judaism is all about, because basically Jews think God is worth having somebody to argue with. And that's the way Unitarian Universalists are. God's making mistakes too, let's say. I mean, who thinks childhood cancer is a divine act? Who thinks natural catastrophes are a wonderful thing, and God, some way, it's a wonderful thing that he's doing, or she or it? Well, surely not. So Jews think they can argue with God, and so do Unitarian Universalists. My Christianity, I'm not a Christian in the traditional sense. I'm a Jesusian. I think I coined the term. And the idea is, I think Jesus was saying, his insight was that we were all children of God, and he was trying to model that. But of course, then a lot of Christians made a mistake. Oh no, he's the one and only Son of God, and the rest of us are damnable sinners. That's not my Christianity. Islam, I really like the concept in Islam of submitting to life, because ultimately we all have to, on a daily way, submit to the realities of existence. So I get down on my face first thing in the morning and put my head against the earth, because I'm trying to say, I submit to the reality of where things are. I've got to deal with that. I can't deal with something else. Now at my age, at 79, I hurt someplace every night. And every morning when I get up, it's not perfect. And my wife and I are talking about something, and then we forget what we were talking about. I mean, it's very annoying getting old, but it's reality. I also think their concept of giving 2.5% of your wealth on an annual basis to the poor and truly needy is a pretty good idea. I mean, it would be great if we did better, but it's kind of like oh, I'm going to tithe to the church, but how many people do? You know, not very many. So yes, there are many things in Islam and each of these traditions that I disagree with, but there are also things that I think are amazing wealth that we dare not just act like they're not there. We're all on our own journeys, and we inevitably must pursue our spiritual aloneness by ourselves. But we can benefit greatly from also being in community with others who will inspire us, challenge us, teach us, and celebrate us. And some of those who change our lives will be strangers from foreign places with surprising faiths and practices. And we can end up finding that some of them may have the answers to our eternal dilemmas and even become the intimate partners of our lifelong journeys. I learned so much from my first wife, and I'm delighted that my daughter Leela and her whole family are here in the audience today, visiting us from Hawaii now. And it's great to have them here. And now at this stage of my life, frankly, I learn more from my children and my grandchildren than they do from me. I do that on a regular basis. And I'm grateful to them for the opportunities they give me. So sometimes it's not strangers, it's your neighbors, it's your beloveds. But other times, it's just somebody out of the blue. And they hand you something, and you have it for the rest of your lives. So don't miss those chances. Amen.
Thank you, John. We invite you now to make an offering. With our offering, each of us has the opportunity to recommit to making UUCB a strong, vibrant community. Offerings of any value are always received with gratitude, any value. For now, we're continuing to conduct the offering in the sanctuary without passing an actual plate. Instead, you can give electronically, or you can use a donation envelope from the back of the pew in front of you and place it into the donation box, which sits beside the fountain in the atrium. For those of you online, instructions for giving will appear on your screen. Remember to indicate pledge or plate. Our plate offering is how we support our wonderful Good Neighbor organizations. Each week, half our plate offering is shared with a good neighbor recommended by our Social Justice Council. We're so grateful that all of you have continued to practice generosity with our good neighbors through these challenging months and years. The Good Neighbor for July is the Contra Costa Family Justice Center. Today, Maria Solorzano, their resource navigator, is here to tell us a little bit about their program. Maria is going to step up to the lectern. Maria?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here in front of all of you and to those of you online to share just a little bit about the Contra Costa Family Justice Centers. So my name again is Maria Solorzano. I am a navigator at the West Family Justice Center located in Richmond. And the center is a one-stop center where any client of ours that has endured any type of interpersonal violence can come to us for resources. And any client that has endured any kind of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, stalking, or human trafficking can receive services at any one of our centers. When someone experiences interpersonal violence, it's very difficult to go through all the different systems and get all the resources that you will need when you've experienced any kind of violence. So a client may need support from law enforcement, may need legal support, may need mental health support, and in that time, you might not have the right, direction. Where do we go? So as a navigator, you come to our center, we welcome you, and we try to help you with those resources. We become your navigator. We help you navigate all of those systems. What is it that you need in this moment? How can I best support you right now? And so, excuse me, we collaborate with over 60 partners, whether they are with the county, nonprofit organizations, and with that, we build relationships. As a navigator, I build relationships with many different partners and make sure that I provide the best services to the clients that come in. What is it that you need today? How can I support you today? Let me connect you to that resource. I know somebody there. I can tell you who they are, and they will be very helpful to you. So we try to provide a full range of trauma-informed services for children, youth, and adults. We serve clients regardless of their income, their gender, location, or immigration status. And all of our services are free to our clients. We have 3 centers in Contra Costa County, one in West, which is in Richmond, our Central Center in Concord, and our East Center in Antioch. The mission of the Family Justice Center is to bring together the community to support healing for survivors of violence and to integrate service providers to renew individuals and the community from the traumas of interpersonal violence. The center's communities building programs include the Family Justice Institute to provide professional training to service providers, Project Connect to increase community awareness of interpersonal violence, and the Community Fellowship Program, which survivors of violence develop leadership skills by creating their own community projects. In 2021, we were able to support over 5,000 clients, 70% of which had children that had either experienced some form of violence or were witnessing the violence at home. So today, I want to thank you in advance for your generosity. It will make sure that we are able to continue to support these families. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And now the offertory. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offerings and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. Well, it's been a really special day today, both in person and virtually, hosting our guest minister, John Young. Thank you, John. Once again, I want to remind you to check out our website, where multiple tabs take you to a wealth of church resources, uucb.org. And remember, the week ahead is there too, under the tab News. I also want to highlight 3 important events. Each one has a lot of information, so give me a few more minutes before coffee hour, okay? First, tomorrow from 5 to 10 p.m. The week ahead has the wrong time, so don't pay attention to that. It starts at 5. We will have our inaugural July 4th celebration here at the church. This is hosted by Family Ministry and Tess Oriva. It's open to all. It's on the terrace. Come play games, indoor and outdoor games, eat a delicious barbecue thanks to our marvelous chef, Bill Brown, maybe play pool or dance in the social hall, and then watch the fireworks across the bay from our terrace. Now, Bill is going to provide the meat, but please bring side dishes, desserts, and drinks to share. The dinner itself will be around 6, but things start at 5. Contact Alice Lemieux for more information. And note, remember, the week ahead says 7 p.m., but things open at 5 and dinner's around 6, and the food will be out as long as it lasts, but, you know, dinner's around 6. So that's really important. Yay, Family Ministry and Tess for inaugurating this new celebration. Okay, then Friday, July 8th at 8 p.m., we're going to have a concert. Roy Zimmerman in concert. Okay, the famous satirical songwriter-singer will perform 90 minutes of his and his wife Melanie's songs here in the sanctuary from the double album This Machine. It includes their song parody, The Liar Tweets Tonight. UUCB was the first Unitarian Universalist church that Roy played in about 15 years ago. He has since played in UU churches in all 50 states. We were the first. Now, this is a fundraiser. Tickets are $25 or pay what you can, available online after the service today right here or at the door. Masks and proof of vaccination are required. See the week ahead or the homepage for more information. It's right on the homepage. Finally, another important event this coming Saturday, July 9th, is our first Freestone Visit Day, or Freestone Picnic Day. It's one of our twice-a-month summer opportunities to visit our Freestone Retreat property as part of the ongoing process to determine the future of Freestone property. It begins at 11:30 a.m. Please contact David Wemmer for more invitation. There he is, there he is, there he is, there he is. And I think we have do we have genuine coffee hour today? I'm unclear on that. Does anybody know? On the terrace. So, will you be here for a little while for coffee hour, David? Oh, right, and they even have a screen. They have a big monitor with a movie.
Drop on by for some information and sign up for the visit next Saturday or following Saturdays, and make it happen.
And a light lunch will be provided, I'm told, for this visit. So there's more information in the atrium. So those are my 3 big announcements. Now, please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our wonderful closing song, number 118, This Little Light of Mine. The words will be on screen.
My dad would have been ecstatic to hear that you're actually going to play pool in church. He would have loved that. I have a new book on world religions that my wife has some copies for out there. It's also on Amazon Books and on Kindle. And I also have a project that I did earlier that was interpretations of all the Old Testament songs. They are creative interpretations, they're not translations. I really had a lot of trouble with the Psalms, and so I decided, well, they're a serious part of Christian and Jewish liturgy, so I better struggle with them. So I did for 7 years. So, yeah. And I think that's also can be gotten on Amazon Books. As we say, help to grow justice, as we help to grow justice, may we do so in ways that help to heal the world. Amen, and blessed be